when you start to have your beliefs challenged, that's when it starts to get scary. But once it gets scary, that's when you know you're on the right path. You have the answers within you. You're accountable for your decisions. Try. If it doesn't work, get up, do it again, try a different way. We shouldn't suppress or cover up or shy away from the natural gifts and energies that our children are, because then they're going to get to their 30s, 40s, and 50s and have to go through the process that we're all going through of finding ourselves.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vibrant Soul Society. I'm your host, Baba Sam, the Miracle Man. Today, we have a very special guest, a vibrant soul with us today, Lauren. So, Lauren, welcome to the conversations.
Hello, happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me into your space.
It's great to have you here today. Let's kick this off with, who is Lauren?
Oh, God. Who is Lauren? I guess the traditional way of answering this is I'm Lauren. I'm mom of two. I live in New Jersey and I am head of a technology company. I run the HR department, but I do a lot of human design, Akashic record reading on the side. I am just an individual looking to grow and expand and to meet new people as my circles are kind of shifting in my life right now. That's pretty much the gist. I think deep down in my soul, I am someone who loves love. I am all about opportunities and possibilities. I live in my imagination, but I'm also extremely practical and strategical. So I feel like I have a nice balance when it comes to that. I guess I'm a person that doesn't necessarily take life too seriously these days.
So, before you get into this human design, Akashic records, what was that kickoff point for you? What was that aha moment that changed the direction for you?
So that aha moment that really led me into this trajectory that I'm on now is when my daughter, my firstborn, was born. I definitely felt myself losing a sense of identity, kind of going into the postpartum depression. It was the first of my friends that had had a child. So I couldn't really talk to anybody that was going through similar things in terms of just being not necessarily scared to be a mom, but more so like, now what? Where's my sense of purpose? I know I have a child, but I don't feel that's my sole purpose in life. But it was a lot of discovery and finding myself on my own because I didn't have anybody to talk to about these things. One night I ended up having a breakdown and I scheduled myself for a therapy session. After that, I booked myself for a tarot session and past life regression, astrology. I did all the types of readings and just someone to talk to and someone to tell me who I was. Having a child, I feel like you enter a new portal of life and your distinction of life. I definitely feel as though when I had my firstborn, that's what really set me on this path. That's when I discovered human design. Once I did all the readings for about a year or so, with that in particular, that to me resonated the most with my access point into all things spirituality, self-help, truly embodying and trying to understand this information from an intellectual standpoint. With human design, I went down the Gene Keys route and then the Akashic route. This is where I am today, still learning, still discovering, and will forever. I'm a perpetual learner for sure.
So you had all these readings. You said the human design was the one that made the most sense to you and really resonated with you. How did your life change? Like, did something click after you got a human design reading?
After I got a human design reading, I actually was very unhappy with my human design reading because for me, when I understood what those energies were in my chart, I had this resistance to that's not me. That's not me. So before I had the reading and when I discovered human design, that's when I'm like, okay, this is going to make so much sense after I have the reading. So I felt drawn to the modality. But when I actually got the reading done, I felt a lot of resistance. After I dug on my own and reflected on the information, that's when I started to be like, okay, that actually makes sense. But when I started to reflect, it was going down memory lane, which not a lot of us like to do because typically going down memory lane kind of rehashes and resurfaces a lot of things that you might want to forget. I feel like it was over the course of time. It wasn't a moment where I'm like, okay, all of this makes sense. And I totally resonate with all of it. It was a muscle really for me to exercise and doing a lot of shadow work, journaling, something I've never done before. I did when I was a child, 14 or so and younger. But as an adult, I never wanted to look back. I wanted to keep looking forward, keep looking forward. So I feel like, yeah, it was definitely over a course of time.
So we'll get into the human design exactly what it is in a moment, but I'm just curious, when you're reflecting on that, was it just for your journaling? Did you do any self-inquiry through meditation? What was that process to unfold your understanding?
Mm. So it was journaling, it was meditation, and I had to build up that meditation because when I was starting out, I didn't feel super comfortable doing it. I definitely am a type of person that feels like I need to be doing things. My mind, however, I don't have necessarily a lot of thoughts or intrusive thoughts that happen when I sit quietly. There's usually nothing going on. So it's more of like, okay, well, I should be doing something. I need to be more productive. I need to see some sort of result from this. So I feel like I had to work up to that. But disciplining myself enough and staying consistent with that discipline was something that was able to help unfold a lot of things. So, yes, meditation, journaling. And I think it was more so observation of the people that I was around, my behavior towards my own children. A lot of it, and if I reflect back on it, I grew up in a household that wasn't necessarily an emotional safe place from a physical standpoint, had everything that you could want, had parents that were both very present, but nobody really dug into the core of things or wanted to explore the why of things, or that curiosity wasn't there. Where I was a very curious kid, so I would always be in my imagination with those things, being able to open up my circles more as I was starting to go through this discovery phase and having like minded individuals share their stories. I was resonating, had similarities in that respect. I feel like I was able to reflect in that way as well by sharing my stories and hearing other people's stories.
Right, because that's a really important key for people to realize to be persistent and consistent with these practices because they sort of build upon each other. If you're doing it here and there, you're not really going to get in depth. Would you find that as well?
Oh, yes. Yes. And that's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to me, especially if I don't feel totally lit up by it when we're talking about consistency. When we get into the human design bit, there's something called a manifesting generator, which I am. And it's very much start something and stopping something. The consistency isn't always there for me. So being able to discern what's worthwhile and staying consistent, that's also something not necessarily inherent for me. And I struggle at times. Absolutely. I would definitely agree.
Yeah, because the mind has all this resistance. Let's not look over here in the shadows. Let's not dig those up. Let's stay comfortable. Let's stay safe.
Because the mind also doesn't want to be accountable, doesn't want to be the reason why. And I feel as though that with what I was going through was also a lot of accountability in the way that I responded, acted, behaved, or put myself in certain situations, especially when you get to a certain age where you are making your own choices, cognitive choices, conscious choices, even though sometimes it feels unconscious. It's definitely something where the mind doesn't want to be the reason of the discomfort. It's actually trying to do the reverse, even though that is actually doing the reverse. So I would agree with you there.
Yeah, that's an interesting dilemma, the paradox we have. The mind doesn't want to look, but yet it's responsible. So it's really an interesting paradox when you bring it up that way. So let's dig into this for people that do not know what human design is. Can you share a little bit more on that?
So, human design is a tool, it's a modality of sorts. It is a gentleman, Ra Uru, who, for anybody super interested in human design, definitely look up jovianarchives.com. It goes through the history of everything there. But basically, it's taking modern sciences and ancient modalities and putting them together. So, it's using Western astrology, it's using the I Ching, it's using the Kabbalah, it's using quantum physics, and it's mapping out the energy you received the moment you were born. So it's taking a snapshot. This is why you need your birth date, time, and location, because depending from an astrology standpoint, where the planets are aligned and the stars, when you're born, there is an imprint, neutrinos, which is the most abundant particle in the universe, is being transmitted at all times, and they carry different types of information. So that's being imprinted to you in the moment of birth. And then it's also calculating 88 days prior to your born. And the 88 days calculation is more so for your unconscious, more so for the body side to your chart. Whereas when the moment you're born, that's more of the conscious or the personality or the mind side of your chart. And it's giving you this quantum energetic blueprint, as it's usually referred to. And it basically highlights how you are naturally meant to move through the world energetically. It is Like Mary Poppins bag, as I typically explain it, because once you gravitate on one aspect of your chart, you can keep going down, down, down. And not one person's chart is the same. If it is, because we have twins or there are C-sections with twins coming out at the same time, the way you express those energies in the chart can differ depending on the nurture aspect, which is your environment, the people who you surround yourself with, your family members, friends, the mood that you're in, the emotions, the transits that are happening energetically around you. So you have a very heavy influence on your chart, but your chart is reminding you who you naturally are. And that's what I love about human design so much, because for me, it gave me permission and really building me up to acceptance of energetically how I express myself and giving me a map into dialing back where I might be in a detriment of an energy, or maybe I'm absorbing more influence and realizing, no, this is not my energy. This is the other person's energy. It's been able to really open my eyes in that respect. And it goes over essentially your theme of life, how you orient through the world, how you learn, how you digest, how you influence others, and how you are influenced by others, depending on the definition within your chart. It's a whole thing for sure.
That's why we call it the Mary Poppins bag, because we have to remember that we are energy and everything in our life is energy. All of our interactions are energy. It all boils down to energy and the interaction of energy.
Yes. When you first look at it, you look at the chart and you're like, okay, where do I even start? Because even though it's what's referred to as a map, you really are looking at it compartmentally. And some things, when you're looking at it compartmentally, you think that it's absolute or you're only defined this way or that way. But again, you're always around other energies that then influence or enhance certain things about your chart. So it's always changing. And no one chart is worse than the other. No energy is worse than the other. It's not like that at all. So it's really being able to look at the whole thing holistically. And then over time, as you reflect, go back to your human design chart to see where you might be in the detriment of an energy. How do you get yourself out of that? How do you transmute that energy? How do you go from conflict to diplomacy? Being able to look at it that way really helps bring in the awareness. And that's something that is the most important to me. And what I've discovered is that it really is accelerating that self-awareness process. It's being able to catch yourself in the moment quicker, because you're human. You're going to respond in certain ways and you're not always going to respond in the best way, but being able to catch yourself in a way that is that self-reflecting or self-awareness approach, and then transmuting and being able to discern and choose. Because at the end of the day, we're all choosing how we're behaving, being able to choose the light versus the dark. That's been a huge benefit for me with human design.
It sounds like a tool that you really dive into. It could help you live your ideal life or your optimal life if you learn how all these things are impacting you and influencing you. Then it could be
Yes.
very useful that way. I could see when you first got this reading, I'm sure it was quite an eye opener. It's like, no, this can't be.
But it really was, because I have the incarnation cross of the Eden, right angle cross of Eden. And there's over 100 and some odd incarnation crosses. And the incarnation crosses are four main energies in your chart. The top two on your left side of the chart and the top two on the right side. It's your sun and your earth energy from your unconscious side and your conscious side. And there are, I don't know, 300 some odd variations altogether of incarnation crosses, but mine is the right angle cross of Eden. And three of those gates sounded awful to me. I had the gate of conflict, the gate of caution, the gate of crisis, and the gate of ideas. And I'm like, oh yes, ideas. That makes sense to me. I got that. But what is crisis, conflict, and cautious? I don't understand, or caution. That doesn't resonate with me at all. When I looked up the traditional terms and the traditional meanings of those gates, the founder, who was the one that transmitted this information, it was channeled to him over the course of 7 or 8 days. He delivered the information in a shocking way, because during, I think it was like 1979 or 1987, somewhere between there, he was the one presenting this to the world. So he had a very blunt way of delivering this information. It's really there to wake you up. And when you look at the detriment side of these energies, I'm very much aware of those now when I read up on it. And when I read up on the lighter versions, because there's other authors out there, other publishers, other practitioners, experts out there in human design Jenna Zoe is one of them. Karen Curry Parker is another one. They all use kind of different ways of languaging it. So you can be more so on the harsher side or the direct side, which is the raw side. And then you have Karen Curry Parker, who I feel is more of the light or softer side of the information. So when you start to cross-reference and understand these energies and then reflect on your own, you can make sense of it. But when I was first discovering it, I was like, oh my God, my cross sucks. I do not like any of this. So that's why I felt resistance. But then when I really did the homework and started to accelerate my study on this, it very much aligned to myself and the energies and how I attract things to myself, what's more prone for me versus not, and where it is in my body graph itself, because there's centers. There's also, it correlates with the chakras as well. So these energy centers where these gates are placed has a theme to them as well. And yeah, I didn't like it at first, but now I love it because it totally makes sense.
So your initial reaction was awful, but that's just a matter of perception. As you learn more, it's like, oh, it's a clue to better learn myself and how to navigate these situations.
Yes. And it's also what I'm realizing too is that, yes, I'm a manifesting generator and I have gate 11, but that isn't me. That is how my energy is working through these types of energies. My essence is working through these energies. I think that's another thing that I'm finding where people really get stuck on their type or their incarnation cross. I think that's who they are. For me, that's not who I am. That's just how I best move or best align to what I'm here to do energetically.
Right. So that makes perfect sense. I really like how you broke that down. We have our essence. We're basically spirit, but how do we move through that energy? That's a real interesting perspective that you're not this human design per se. You're this essence, and this is how you move through the design of
Yes.
your life.
When you dig a little bit deeper, there's something called the gene keys. The gene keys is like the sister to the human design. Richard Rudd is the transmitter of this information, super knowledgeable man. The gene keys takes elements, including your incarnation cross within your human design, and it gives you these sequences. It's called the genius sequence the genius sequence or the golden path, because there's 3 different types of sequences. It takes these energies, these certain elements in your chart, and it lays out what you're here to do purpose-wise, your relationships and how you work in relationships that then lead to prosperity or the abundance. Being able to see these energies line up a certain way and to use what's called the pathways, that's where you can start to find the how of your chart. There's your chart where you can compartmentalize, understand the energies intellectually or conceptually. And then you have gene keys where I gravitate more toward putting the pieces together to give more practicality to what can be done. And a lot of that is reflective work and working with people one-on-one and giving any sort of practicality tools, things like that within what needs to be discussed or uncovered. But I do find that the gene keys is a deeper way of now trying to embody the information and to understand and observe the energies at play to then navigate and move accordingly.
Yeah. I looked at the gene keys 10 years ago, but it was just this is part of my journey. It just didn't really stick with me. I just focused on getting rid of all this mental garbage. But I think it's
Yes,
very,
yes,
very useful to how you navigate life to people that don't have an understanding and need a path. Like you said, you had all these readings and you found the one that resonated for you. I think it's important for people to understand is to go experiment, to go see what's out there, then see which one resonates with you. And that's most likely your path. It's not like one size fits all as we go through life. You got to find that thing that is for you.
yes. Couldn't agree more. The experimenting is so key. I would sometimes find myself pausing or being stagnant in that experiment because in a way it was a lot of self-sabotage that I noticed was coming up of no, 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 don't do that. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. You know what it is, but you don't have to actually do it. That's a lot of the mind talking, not getting me to go through that experience because God forbid I will uncover something or discover something that maybe the mind doesn't necessarily like or my beliefs would be challenged. Fortunately for me, I've always been a person that is very open to different belief systems and the diversity of thought. I can see how that shows up in other people's lives. Let's take my parents for an example, where they have a very structured way of thinking and a certain belief system. This type of work challenges that. It starts to shatter everything that you've known. And for me, when I say this type of work, this is my access point into spirit. This is my access point into things that are greater than myself, and understanding the universe as much as I can and really trusting in it. When you start to have your beliefs challenged, that's when it starts to get scary. But once it gets scary, that's when you know you're on the right path. That's what I believe.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it because the mind is filled with mental resistance. Even the subtlest stuff, the mind will resist because the mind does not like change, does not like the unknown. So that's a real important key is if you're going on a path, be aware your mind might drag up some more stuff to create procrastination and protest.
Oh, yes. Yes, it definitely will. And I've been there, done that. I still struggle with that from time to time. And sometimes I'll sit there on the couch and be like, Lauren, go do something. Go do what you say you're going to do. Well, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. Because then there's that rebellious of like, I don't want mom to tell me what to do type of thing, you know? So yeah, everyone's different, but I see how it shows up. I'm very much aware. Sometimes I give in and sometimes I don't. Still human.
Right. So your children are too young to be impacted by this, but have you seen any influence on your husband by yourself changing into learning more who you are?
Yes. So my husband is very different than me. I feel like we don't have anything necessarily in common from the surface level stuff. Our values are very much the same. We've always been the type of people that are very respectful of our likes, activities, and then we come together on our similarities. But for the most part, the way that he thinks is completely opposite to me. So think of me as someone that loves to be in the imagination. Anything's possible. There's unicorns and I'm floating around in the sky. He's the type of person that is on the ground, head in the sand, being like, we need to secure, we need to have safety. So I feel like he's my rock in the way of I'm his balloon. So I pull him up while he pulls me down. I mean that in a good way where we really balance each other because we're very different, especially when it comes to our thought processes, the way we look at a situation. I will default to the benefit of the doubt or more optimistic side. He will be more skeptical or more doubtful with things. So he definitely grounds me. And it's funny that you're asking me this because a couple of weeks ago, I asked him over the past year or so, what have you noticed change in me? Sometimes I need that. I don't necessarily see things in myself, especially when I'm around other people or how I've been impacting people. I can think that I'm impacting them, but I actually want to know. So being able to call that out is something that I'm working on doing. I think this also goes to like not asking for help, but that's another thing. With asking Chris, what have you seen? He instantly said, there's so much more patience. He's like, I've been witnessing you and I feel like I'm learning from you because I see you do that. I know what you're doing, even though I don't necessarily get into the weeds with you. I see the result of it. I notice him in terms of his reaction to things and how he handles certain situations. Like if the girls are riding the bikes and they fall, his reaction would be to panic or to jump in, raise his voice and be like, you have to watch out. Where you see him now not respond the way that he would. So reactionary. I do notice that he does notice in me the patience that seems to be trickling over to him. And that's something too with any of this type of work, anything as it relates to inner self, spiritual work, meditation in general is just cultivating that patience is so relevant and or prevalent, I should say, in a lot of people's journeys. Because I think it also with patience, you're able to be more present because you aren't necessarily in a reactive mode. You're really in a response mode at that point because you're pausing.
Right. That takes a lot of courage to ask somebody, how have I changed? Because the mind doesn't like that reflection back sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely because I don't want to know the answer, especially if I'll feel hurt or embarrassed or rejected by it. So I think even with this type of work, reaching out to you, putting yourself out there is a way that is demonstrating, vulnerability, but also with vulnerability, there's extreme openness. And I believe that what you put out, you get back. So if you're doing with intention of love, I think that you'll receive that back. So I got to do more of asking for help, putting myself out there and all that good stuff. It's a muscle I still got to work at.
Yeah, that's one way to tear down the mental barriers is by pushing those boundaries. Is like, no harm's going to come to me. Let me just ask. The mind's always in a
Yes.
place of fear of what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. That makes me think about our primitive way of being back in the Neanderthal days and how that instinct of fear survival was very much necessary. Whereas now I feel like we're kind of shifting into more of this emotional way of being. We went from primitive fear, hunter gatherer, survival mentality to intellectual mentality, especially with industries, corporations, things like that over the past 400 years or so. And now kind of getting into more of this emotional way of existing and realizing that the fear isn't here to kill me. If I ask for help, nothing's going to hurt me the way that I feel like in our DNA, how that shows up. We still think that we need to fight to survive in that way. And that's not the case at all in 2024, at least in this
Right.
lifetime dimension of reality.
Because the mind was always prepared for fight or flight mode. And that's the way the mind operates. We need to break through some of those barriers that are preventing us from living and expressing ourselves. That you're putting yourself out there now. So you're here to express yourself. You're here to give the human design to others to see if that's their path and you can help them on that way of life.
Yes.
Because there's just so many tools out there. For me, it was a process of seeing what was out there after healing myself. Okay, what's out there now? Because I had no spiritual information whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's overwhelming actually how much is out there. And of course, with me, I'm like, okay, yeah, I want all the things. And it's also because I've sunken my teeth into this and this resonates with me so much, I am able to discern a lot more with what I want to indulge in or experiment with. There's also a part of me that feels like it's so much that people get confused or don't really feel as though they can start with one thing because they have to do all the things. And maybe they're not staying with one thing versus another. So it can be confusing and overwhelming and overstimulating.
That's a really important point is that go experiment, but don't let procrastination get in the way. See what resonates, then just pursue that, stay on that path. Because if you're going down that path and you switch over to here, oh, nope, I'm going to switch over to here, then you're not really evolving or growing.
Yes. And I feel like, especially now, people want the quickest fix possible and they want the answers given to them. I think that in the work that we're doing, it's very much the long term game and being able to know that you hold the answers. And that's something with human design, with Gene Keys, with the Akashic records, coming back to self and realizing that you are your moral compass and you don't need the validation or necessarily the external permission from things outside of yourself. And I think in society, we've given our power away in that regard. So I feel like now, especially the generations that are coming up and whatnot, we're seeing this shift in mentality of figuring out for yourself or challenging the truth because there's so much available and so much information. And we just don't know, is it right? Is it wrong? Is it right for me? Is it wrong for me? There's nothing in absolutes. It's not black and white for everybody. I think that it's really important to understand that with these types of tools that I work with, you're your own guidance system. You have the answers within you. You're accountable for your decisions. Try. If it doesn't work, get up, do it again, try a different way. It's a lot of flexibility and it is in your control, so to speak.
That's the first important step is learning who you are, who your divine essence is, and not the mental stories.
Yeah. To be yourself is to know yourself. That's kind of been my motto with human design and all the things that I work with.
Because you start with your essence, then you learn how do I move through the world that's best for me.
Yes, absolutely.
So what I see with human design is it's teaching you how you move through the world, what are your triggers, where your deficits are, and what you accelerate in so you can really have this ideal life.
Yes. And with human design too, it helps you drop from the mind into the body. So you're making choices from your body, not your mind, and understanding your strategy and authority depending on your type. You're able to move accordingly.
Right. Another important point is that usually we're making these mental choices that are not the best for us from our subconscious programming that we're not even aware of. That's why I tell individuals, you're either in your mind or you're in your heart, and your heart has your answer. Your mind is guessing the answer based on past experiences. So I'm curious to learn, how does the human design help you dive into your deeper truth so you can know how to move through the world?
So with human design, there's something called strategy and authority. Depending on your type, we'll take mine for example. My type is a manifesting generator. This energy is very quick. It's very go, go, go. It wants to go from A to D to X to B, to jump all over the place, to find efficient ways to build the bridges to get to where we're going quicker and where we're going, whether it's person, the group, the collective. My authority is in my emotional solar plex. So my way to make decisions is, let's say, for example, you asked me to be on the podcast. My sacral says, yes, I want to be on the podcast. Following your body and what those responses are, because sometimes it's not a sacral response. Sometimes it's not a gut reaction of yes, no. Sometimes it's more of an intuitive sense, a quick whisper, or maybe a feeling in your chest. You have to talk it out loud. Maybe you're a projector that has a G center authority. You need to speak it out loud to hear yourself, to know if it makes sense, the right choice for you. So being able to use my authority, which is actually in my emotional solar plex, my sacral says yes, but because I have an element of my emotional solar plex, I really need to ride out my emotional wave. Because for me, there's no truth in the now. Being able to know as a generator or a manifesting generator, being able to know your yeses and nos is very important, because that's how you're going to be guided. If you use your strategy and authority, depending on your type, then the rest of your chart, you don't even have to look at, because you're so in tune with your bodily responses that it's aligning naturally to your energy. So with the emotional solar plex, going back to that example, because it's emotional, I have to ride out the wave. So saying yes could mean yes for right now, but for me, there's no truth in the now. So taking a couple days, 24 hours, depending on what the request is, depending on the engagement, the project, the person, whatever it is. It could be 2 hours, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months, depending how big. But being able to ride out that emotional wave, because I could get really excited, but then I could be like, oh, wait, I don't really want to do that. That doesn't feel good to me. Why did I say yes? Being able to ride out that wave brings you back to neutrality, and you can make more of a firm in alignment decision if it's still yes. Knowing those things within your chart can really help guide you to the aligned things that are meant for you versus the things that you're committing to and that you feel resistance to, or that you're feeling frustrated, bitter, angry, or disappointed. So all of it, I believe right now there's 5 types in human design, and each one, there's about 8 different authorities, depending on what's defined or colored in your chart. That gives you the authority. And they all have a strategy and approach specifically.
Right, because we've been talking about type. So people are probably wondering, how can they find their type? What is the resource they can go to find their type?
If you would like, you can visit my website, laurenfedak.com. I can generate your chart there. You can download your chart and a free foundational report. It's about a 15-page report. It goes into depth of what your type is, what your profile is, your strategy, authority, and all the defined centers that you have, and some tips, especially in those undefined centers, because where you see white in your chart, that's where you're more likely to absorb energy from other people and reflect it back. So definitely you can check out my website. You can go to Jovian Archives website. I believe Genezo has an app. I've used it before. Super helpful, but all you'll need is your birth date, time, and location.
That's great. My next question was, after you find your type, what's an initial resource that you can read to learn a little bit about it? And you provide that for them on your website.
Yes, it'll have like I said, the document. I try to make it as valuable as possible. I pack a lot of information in there, and it's free, and I encourage everybody to check it out. And I love to hear if anybody resonates with it or doesn't, especially those that don't resonate, because I can definitely relate from pulling your chart.
Right, because I'll have to check out your site because I'm curious about that. When I initially was studying the gene keys, the book was huge. I'm like, this is so much information.
Yeah, it's very intimidating, that book. The thing that I love about the gene keys is that it has the physiology element to it. So all of these energies in your chart actually connect to things biologically within you. Being able to match those with the gene keys is really fun information. It's very in depth. But yeah, that gene keys book, it's just all the 64 gates and your shadows, your gifts, your cities, but it doesn't necessarily be the path for you to explore. It's just kind of an encyclopedia, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it. It doesn't really give you the path to explore. It does feel like an encyclopedia. So with the gene keys, it's more of a path to find your way through life.
Well, with gene keys, when you start to uncover what's called your brand sequence or your genius sequence, that's highlights your purpose or your incarnation cross in human design. And then there's the love sequence that goes through the elements in your chart that reflect your relationships, your relationship with yourself, and the time periods in which you developed this energy. That's always really interesting to look at, especially 0 to 7, 7 to 14, where those two spheres are within that sequence and the love sequence. And then there's the third sequence for gene keys, which is the prosperity sequence. And that's the unfolding of your genius sequence and your love sequence. So it does have you work through understanding those energies. When you understand them, they work on a deeper energetic level because your awareness, your consciousness does everything on the back end, so to speak. Then you start to recall certain moments in time, bringing more awareness so you can be more aligned. And that's basically what the Gene Keys does, at least with my experience.
I don't remember my experience. It was too long ago when I would start to dive into that. Went to a few meetings. We had a little group one in my spiritual center for that, but it was just too much at that time when I was trying to discover the spiritual world.
Well, now see, spirits, you got to jump back into it because I'm bringing it up to you.
Yes, I'll look at it again. I'll get to your website, get it up in the basic report, and it might shoot you some questions. What about this? And we'll see where it goes. That's what we have to realize too with this spiritual journey. We're never done. As you said before, you can go all down these different avenues, but you're never done. Nobody sticks a fork in you and say, oh, you're done with your spiritual journey. It doesn't work this way.
Yeah, no. And some days you're like, God damn, can it just be over? But then you just have to remember you signed up for this. So just do it. And you got to be grateful because you get to have this experience. You have a unique energy out there to everybody else in this whole world. There will never be someone like you ever, before or after you. So knowing what you know, going through all the things, all the spiritual things, understanding your chart, going through gene keys, doing the Akashic, like doing everything. What a gift when you really think about it. But then sometimes you're like, but I'm ready for it to stop. I'm ready to go home. I'm not, but I am.
Yeah, and that's an important point that we're all unique expressions. Even if you're twins born at the same exact time, you're going to live different lives.
Yes, because you're going to surround yourself with different people. Your lens is going to be different than your essence is different than that soul's incarnation. So it's still unique to you, regardless if you're twins.
Is there any last nuggets you want to share with anyone that we haven't discussed today?
Nuggets, I encourage everyone to do their self-discovery, no matter how old you are, where you're at in your life, especially if you have children, if you're a parent. I highly encourage you to start understanding a little bit more who you are or even who your child is when it comes to the energetic aspect of things and understanding your dynamic relationship. I feel like we really are here to pave the way for future generations. I would love to be part of a collective that helps the younger generation discover who they are and to help them live authentically as long as possible. That's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, that's a very important point. You probably looked at your children's human design and you're like, now I can better relate to them and guide them through this confusing world.
Yes. And when I discovered my children's chart, I felt so much more at ease as a parent because I started to notice how these energies start to show up. For example, my two have different digestion types and the way that they take in food as ways they take in information, understanding their energy and how they do that. We don't necessarily sit down as a family every single night and eat everything on your plate. My one daughter likes things very, very simple. And she will eat more when it's just simple. Whereas my other one likes to move around and get up, and she'll eat more when she's being active, but she has more of what's called a nervous digestion, whereas the other one has more of an alternating digestion. And being able to accommodate that and understand that and see how that's actually showing up, it's the closest thing to a manual for a child that you can get. So I appreciate it.
That's a good way to explain it. It's a manual for your children because you will have two children, they can be complete opposites, and you don't know any ideas like, I'm raising them the same. Why are they so different?
Yes, yes. And that's when you can start to accept that at the end of the day, everyone is different, including our children. And we should nurture who they are. We shouldn't suppress or cover up or shy away from the natural gifts and energies that our children are, because then they're going to get to their 30s, 40s, and 50s and have to go through the process that we're all going through of finding ourselves. Let them just be themselves.
You can help them bring out their gifts, strengths, and where they should be focusing.
Mhm. Yes.
How can people reach out to you if they want to get in contact with you?
So people, I have a Facebook page. Feel free to follow me there. I'm also on Instagram, or you can check out my website, laurenfedak.com. This is where you can book a clarity call with me. I have different types of sessions where we have a chart reading, an Akashic record session. I have a 3-month program where we're able to take elements from human design, gene keys, and Akashic records from an intellectual standpoint. This is really the embodying part. This is the how part. Working with you closely there is what I'll do as a one-on-one experience. I have a Facebook group called Human Design Harmony. It's something that is really, I'm really trying to allow to grow on its own. And I really want this to be the hub of everything, because I don't believe human design is it. I think that there is a whole bunch of modalities, techniques, and tools out there, and practitioners out there, experts, seekers, that we can all exist in a hub. For now, it's Human Design Harmony for the Facebook group.
Okay, great. So I'll have all those links in the show description. I really like that, the human design harmony, how to come into harmony with yourself and harmony
Yeah.
with life.
Got it.
Thank you for your time. Really enjoyed having you on the conversations.
Thank you so much. I'm so, so honored to be here. Thank you.